can still play at an intensity and a quick tempo with composure. You know, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think you can have both, and I think that's the key. When we had the partnership coming with Barcelona, it was very much they pride themselves on the winning and is a consequence of how we play. But you've always got to, I think, understand the why are you doing it, as opposed to, well, I've seen this exercise being done and now I'm going to do that in my training session. It's a challenging environment, but it's such a fun environment to be in as well.
Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach Breakdown. Big one today. Ged Quinn, Academy Director at the Barca Residency Academy in Arizona, joins us to talk about how they structure tactical teaching, the Barca methodology, their approach to player development, and how all of this coexists in a US culture as well. Fascinating insight from Ged. If you enjoy, please like, please subscribe, please share it with your coaching community. It means a lot. And also please check out the new content, all the free content over at modernsoccercoach.com. Tons of information out there. It's uploaded multiple times during the week. So there's loads of free stuff, no login required. You can just go on there, grab the stuff, and hopefully share it with your coaching network. Thank you so much for the support. Here is Ged. Enjoy.
Ged, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to chat.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, Gary. Looking forward to talking with you as well.
The evolution of Barca is where I want to start. This obviously this is gonna get a lot of interest with coaches. I mean, how many coaches in this country have been trying to play like Barca for the last 10, 15 years? Thousands. But the style has evolved, and I did a recent interview about this here, and I found this really interesting, where football styles they're kind of like fashion. Some goes in and out, but Barca has been consistent across the board. And when you're trying to apply that to the youth level and to people coming up, I'm fascinated by basically where you see the evolution, either in the system or in the player profile at the club.
Yeah, it's a good question, Gary. I think, I've been here in the academy here for 7 years, and I think that the principles of it are very much still the same. But I do think I think the game, as we all know, is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. It's constantly new ideas coming in and new concepts coming in. I think the big thing for me that I've seen is maybe the perception of the positional game and the positional style of play is very rigid in how it would be played. And I think it's actually evolving a little bit that way, and where maybe it's now viewed as a lot less rigid, and there's a lot more fluidity and dynamism that goes in with that. And that's something that I've definitely seen here. I always think back to, I know there's probably a viral clip that goes back to when I think Henry's talking about a winger staying, high and wide and creating the space for somebody else. And I think that's still, applicable in the game. That still happens a lot. But I also think there's times when maybe there's the movements and there's the fluidity that goes with it, and it's the occupation of the space that then creates the advantages that the players are looking for. And for example, the 4-3-3 formation that we play is very fluid still, in that, we'll try and talk to the boys. Well, if we're building out against maybe a 4-4-2 formation or a 4-4-2 press, what does that mean? There's an option of, there's multiple solutions, but maybe it's centre backs go wide, the 6 drops in, and you now look like you're almost playing a 3-4-3, but it's very fluid, and everybody knows their role, everybody knows their responsibility, and you almost want it to be a little bit of that. You want the players to restructure around the ball, restructure around the opponent, and base themselves on where the teammates are, where the opposition is. And we have the luxury here. We have the Barca methodology directors that meet with us daily, weekly, and we've had some really smart guys in the past that have come through and been part of the process. And they talk about the complex systems and how that ties into how using real life scenarios into relating it to the game. And it's fascinating to listen to them dissect it a little bit and go into the depths of it and look at how those relations apply to the game of soccer as well, and how it involves the positional play game that we all want to try and play here at our end.
The piece that I think analysis has added is that we're now that rigidity. Sometimes analysis leans into that a little bit, where again you can look at something and you don't really know what's coach led or what's just natural state of the game. And I've even seen some of the Barcelona analysis, and I've listened to a few presentations, and they are ahead of the game in terms of the detail that they're looking at the game. So when you add the detailed approach and you add the system that's been consistent, is there a trap sometimes, or even a temptation to lean into information as a coach? Or I guess, how do you combat that there, where you still have that fluidity in it?
Yeah, it's another good question, Gary. I think one of the one of the things we would always say when you ask the Barca guys a question, the answer you always get is, well, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on the situation, and that's sometimes where our boys have to understand that as well. And we'll always say that the differentiator is in the decision making process. How do the boys consistently make the right decisions, and that's dictated by a lot of different factors. Where are the teammates, where are we on the field, where's the opposition, what's the score? Sometimes even that can dictate everybody's actions. But it is definitely where we'll try and very rarely say, well, you always have to do this, you always have to do that. It's you need to look at the situation, and in that contextual moment, make a decision that you think is right. And that's where we'll maybe go back after the fact and work with them. If it's in a training situation, we'll put them in different scenarios where they can make the decision on their own, because ultimately, if we're joysticking it too much, the decision-making process is taken out of it for the player. And I think it's key for them to have to learn how to do that. And they may not always get it right, but, we don't always get it right either, right? I think that's part of the game, and mistakes are going to happen. And it's learning and evolving and refining that decision-making process.
It was actually one of my last questions, but I think it rolls into this nicely. And I'm sure you get it a lot, where you see and you visit, and you've been around in clubs over here. When you see people trying to kind of lift the Barcelona, I don't know if even if the methodology is a little bit too, maybe just lift the state of play and put it there and coach positional play. Where do you see the most common mistakes in positional play coaching?
Yeah, I think it's one where I think you can, anybody can copy the exercise, right? I'll use the stereotypical, 4v4 plus 3, right? That everybody sees a lot. We do that a lot for our warm-ups. I think people need to understand the why are you doing it? What's the purpose? Because we'll always say as well, an exercise can be the same exercise, but based on the constraints or the rules that you implement in it, it can work on something very different. You might be working on specifically the six, and I know when I say the six, ironically when we say positional play, we actually don't assign positions, but if you use the player in the middle, you might be working on them being able to, turn under pressure, or, check the shoulders. You might put them under a touch restriction, or you might put them under, or you might put the outside players on a limitation that, that dictates that. But you've always got to, I think, understand the why are you doing it, as opposed to, well, I've seen this exercise being done and now I'm going to do that in my training session. Well, what is the purpose? What are you trying to get out of it? We have the different topics and the different themes that we'll focus in on, that always doesn't maybe line up to, to maybe different styles of play, different methodology, but you could still use that same exercise to bring out that theme or topic within your sense. So I think there always has to be the question of, well, why are we doing it? What's the purpose, and what are we trying to get out of it?
I'm going to sound like a Barcelona fan on this podcast, but I've just always respected the way they've been about it. Just from my perspective, they've been about obviously success and winning, but also development, and that's been a key aspect of. I think we sometimes trade one, or we think we trade one off for the other over here. We think we have to go with success, win at all costs, or we have to just develop and forget about success. Barcelona seems to have done them both. In your perspective of leadership role at that, I guess, how on earth do you balance that?
Yeah, really good question again, because I think, well, like everybody, we always, we want to win. We're just as competitive as the next club, but it's not our priority win at all costs. I think, when we had the partnership coming with Barcelona, it was very much, they pride themselves on, the brand. They want to see, they want people to watch our teams play and say, well, that's Barca Residency Academy. That's that team. And they will say the winning is a consequence of how we play. And the development piece will come behind that. Now, that being said, obviously, it's, like you said, it's very easy if you're losing every game to go, we're focusing on the development piece. We've been successful in the last couple of years in finding a little bit of balance in both, but we haven't always got it 100% right. I think I look back to, a game early in my career here when, we'd made a playoff game and we went a goal down. And I think in that moment as a coach, adjusted how we played, and we were going, maybe a little bit more direct and, a little bit more long ballish and just hitting hope sort of thing, as desperation almost. And I'll always remember when Dennis Silva came in. Dennis Silva was our first technical director, and he talked about a time when he was coaching the La Masia under-14 boys team in an event, and he said he was playing a team that they'd lost against. They were a little bit outmatched physically, so he'd adjusted the way that he wanted to play it to be, well, we're going to sit in a bit of a low block, we're going to keep it compact, and we're going to try and transition against them. And he said half time it's 0-0, and he said as a coach I'm feeling really good because we've kept the game as it is. And he said his director came and sort of said to him, Dennis, what are you doing? This is not us. And it's just play how we want to play and play with freedom. So don't feel pressure for the result. And he said second half we went out, we lost the game 1-0, played more the way we want to play. So the director comes after and said, much better. So even though they lose the game, it's and that was a team I think that he had Ansu Fati on that team, and so it's easy to look. I think we always want to look at the long term vision of players, and do we want to win? Of course we do, but we look at it as are we developing players, are we preparing them for the next level? We had a team 2 years ago that got knocked out in playoffs by FC Dallas on penalties, but we were so proud of how they played in that game, and that year we had 4 of those guys sign professional deals.
Sometimes you do view it that you're doing the right thing as a coach, and the other team are not doing it right. And
just touch on that, Gary. We one of the things I say to our coaches now, because again we can all get caught up in the moments of games, and sometimes we view as are we being successful as a coach on are we winning or losing, and I'll try and preface it with the guys and say, you could do everything wrong as the coach and win the game. I said, and on the flip side, you could do everything right as the coach and lose the game. So I said, don't judge your success on the result at the end. Judge it on, are the boys doing what you're asking them to do? Are they trying to play? Are they playing with freedom? Are they playing with bravery? And are they ultimately trying to implement what we're asking them to do? May not always, result in that win that you want. But we'll always say in the long term, it's going to be beneficial.
The piece of the final third play, this is like my favorite question I want to ask you, is because again, it's something that it made viral a few years ago. Where you mentioned there about Thierry Henry, part of the clip is like, and I think this impacted coaches with game models a lot, where, hey, listen, I'll get you to the final third and then it's up to you to do whatever. And sometimes I think, well, if you're working with Henry and Messi and Iniesta, that could be an option, but I struggle to find that Pep Guardiola is coaching that type of football. And I wanted to get I know you can't share the whole game models, but are there principles in the final third, or can you share a little bit of insight on that there?
Yeah, it's one where I will preface this with we do sometimes struggle in those areas. It's probably the area of the field because, like you say, you don't always have the Messis or the Henrys that can maybe isolate somebody and always consistently beat them in a 1v1. But we always say to the players in those moments, that is the area of the field where you have maybe the creativity to use your flair, to use your skill. But we also within the same moment will say it's important to have the structure. And I know I think you did a talk with Ivan Militar, who was one of our coaches a couple of years ago, and he did a really good article on what he labeled like the wave attacks, and we label it almost as like the phase spaces and managing the space around the ball. So how do you create advantages? And that can be, numerical, positional, qualitative. Are you just simply better than someone? We would, use the example of Messi. You'd almost put Messi in a 2v1 against him and you trust that he could do something. But how do you create that advantage? Is there a social effective advantage that you can create as well? The Messi, Jordi Alba effect, that they just know how each other play. And but we'll always say in that final third, and I'll maybe paint a picture of a scenario we see a lot within our teams, is teams will maybe play transitional against us because they'll know that we're going to consistently try and build. And there was a game last year where we were went 1-0 down against the team. They scored against the run of play a little bit in transition, and they then just sat in a low block and they said, okay, try and break us down, and they went 2 banks of 5, and we were struggling a little bit to break them down. There was no space, there was no numbers, and we would always try and have that structure for the wave. That's what, if we lose it, we're in a position to win it back, and it becomes a relentless wave of attacks, as you would say. But even sometimes there, it's how do you create that advantage if a team is sitting in, and all of a sudden we've looked, and the team was sitting so much in a deep block that our goalkeeper had come up to the halfway line. He was almost acting as an extra centre back for us in that moment. It now meant we could have an extra body higher up the field, and it meant we could maybe find a numerical advantage, because it was essentially then an 11 versus 10 of field players. And the risk reward of that is that, yes, maybe if you lose it, you're going to be vulnerable to another transition. But the trust of our players was, well, we've got an 11v10, so why should we lose the ball? We've got enough players. And it was interesting even seeing the reaction of the other coach, because he's frantically, maneuvering his players and having them, shift and slide and press to the ball and close the spaces. And all of a sudden he turns around and they've got another one, because now and that's just one slightly unique example. But in the final third, it's allowing them to play with a bit of creativity, allowing them to be brave, but making sure that we have structure around the ball, that if it doesn't work, we can recover the ball as quickly as possible and we can win the ball back and maybe have another go. And sometimes it's ball movement. Sometimes it's, recognizing where the free man is. Sometimes it's movements off the ball, but it's always dictated by, like I said before, teammates, where the opposition are, what's the score, how are we opening teams up. But it is an area that, can be a challenge if we go a goal down and the team sits in. How do we solve that problem?
Hello, coaches. We'll take a quick break here. If you're enjoying this interview and you enjoy the Modern Soccer Coach content on this YouTube channel, please, could you do us two quick favors? Number one, can you please like and please make sure you're subscribing? It helps the podcast grow, helps us get the word out, and helps us support all the other work we're doing. Second point is around that other work we're doing. We're looking at updating the Modern Soccer Coach website 2-3 times a week with new content, new information. Please head on over there. Please check it out. The majority of the work we do is free. modernsoccercoach.com/latest. But if you want more in-depth stuff and get involved in the analysis course, that's the next tier of tactical information on Modern Soccer Coach. Please check that out. modernsoccercoach.com/analysis. We've got our online course. We've also webinars on that platform. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Back to Ged.
Brings us along nicely then. Another challenge, almost a victim of success, I think, for Barcelona could be that they've produced so many world-class players, but there's such a wide variety of, for every Messi, you then have a Puyol or you have a Busquets who's 6 foot whatever and not the quickest. So they've taken different roles in different positions, etc., etc. But the one thing I've never seen is like a big knockdown centre forward. So when you're looking at positional profiles, is there something that is just, not to say what does a Barca player look like, is there something that's just not on the table at all, like a 6'5" centre forward who's going to knock the ball down and lean into people? That might be a stupid question.
No, it's a really good question, Gary, because I think one of the misconceptions is often that everything is short, everything is playing the 5-10 yard pass, and that's often the case. But one of the first things Dennis Silva sort of told us when we came in is look far first. If a team is high pressing and you can skip that press and go into your number 9, do that, and then we go and support the number 9 from there. And so it definitely isn't one where we would rule out that maybe doesn't fit the stereotypical player, because we always, I'm not going to say we laugh about it, but whenever we have ID camps or we have tryout events and players come in, everybody lists themselves as a 6 and 8 or a 10. Everybody's a centre midfield player, and you're putting them maybe outside and maybe as the number 9, and a lot of them have the tendency then to drop in and want to get the ball underneath the lines. I do think it's one where it's probably the hardest position for us to find that within our system, a profile that can suit. I think probably the last one that really did it very well was Matthew Hoppe. He was here the first couple of years, and ironically he came to us as a midfielder, and he played for Sean McCaffrey's team. I know you've spoken, you know Sean well as, and Sean sort of converted him into a number 9, and he was fantastic. His movement was second to none in regards to playing off the shoulder, but still had that ability to come underneath and be comfortable receiving it under pressure, but also would play off the shoulder, and also had a knack of just being in the right place at the right time, and scoring the scruffy goals, and or even having a game where didn't necessarily do much in the game, but would then all of a sudden pop up and score 2 goals, and steal the headlines from from some of the other guys, and just had that almost old school number 9 mentality of just being a hard working goal scorer that would press and do the dirty work, along with being comfortable in possession and playing under a bit of pressure.
You mentioned there about that kind of the hardest position to find is that 9. And if I had a pound or dollar for every time I'm talking to coaches over here, and at the youth level, it's goalkeepers are a 9, but the 9's always there. People seem to struggle, and if you look at national teams on the men's side, you don't really have that consistently over the last 10, 15, maybe since maybe McBride, Donovan. What's your thoughts on that and the landscape in general?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think the way that players are maybe being developed, I think the game's evolved a lot recently in the US. I mean, it's always changing, and I think that with the way we train the guys, I think maybe there's more groups doing more of this maybe style of training, and maybe one of the criticisms could be that it maybe doesn't lend itself to that side of it. There maybe isn't enough in the regular training sessions for them to be playing in the space and behind, or being that dynamic number 9. But I think that's where for us, we try and use the functional training a little bit more with that. Maybe it's offsetting it a little bit with that. But I do think you have again, I think it swings and roundabouts with the generations, and the maybe we'll start to see what's happening now. Maybe that in 5 to 10 years, there's more of those players that come through just by osmosis of what we're doing in the training sessions across the country. But the landscape has changed so much that I think it is an interesting dynamic seeing how the different profiles of players are emerging. And I think the US has that stereotype of maybe more of the big, strong, fast, athletic, but I think there's also now a lot of small, technical, good central midfielders coming through, and I think they want to make sure that they have a well-rounded development model, right? Are you developing good players in every position? And part of our role in the youth landscape is ensuring we're helping to do that.
We've seen a rise in US players in the import part of the game now, where more are going to Europe, and I've seen a few myself where you've seen players go now at 16, 17 on fairly big money deals, and the whispers around the football world are that US kids are fairly always with a good attitude, good work ethic, strong commitment to the game. What's your thoughts on that there, on I guess a progression maybe in our culture over here, that we are now producing not world-class players, but definitely players that can go to academies around the world?
Yeah, I think there's it's such a hotbed of talent now, Gary. I think I've been in the US 19 years, and I think the development and just the exposure that the boys have to the game now, and I think it's the US is always going to have its challenges in the demographics and the size of the country that can sometimes cause problems, but there is so much more talent here, and I think you're seeing even we had one of our alumni, Julian Araujo, that was with us the first 18 months, that actually went to Barcelona, and that was part of our partnership. Is every year we send guys over there, and he went as a 16-year-old to Barcelona, and they were like, where's this kid come from? They said if he was Spanish, we'd sign him right now. And obviously with the FIFA restrictions, it put some roadblocks in there. But they ultimately then he comes back and he signs with LA Galaxy because he's 16 and he's at that level. So he's there. But he full circle then signs for Barcelona 4 years later, and then just gets sold to Bournemouth. Just made his debut in the Premier League this past weekend. Wow. So he was a kid that 7 years ago was in the residency program here, and he actually was really really cool. He did a Zoom call with our boys as part of our preseason here, and spoke about what his mentality was, and what he wanted to do, and how he wanted to get there, and how the soccer for him was his out. That was his out to get into a different life, and it was funny because he's saying, well, I was in room 308, so the boys in room 308 now are now this is I'm in Julian's room, so that they're all trying to follow the same path. But I think going back to your question, there's so much more talent coming through the US, and I think that the European clubs are recognizing that, and I think the US have done a good job of ingraining the culture, and the game has grown so much, and I think with the World Cup coming up in a couple of years, I think it's only going to explode again, and evolve again, and I think we're at a really exciting time to be involved in the game in the US, because where it's at now, I think it's just on that upward trajectory, which for me is going to be exponential potential.
Yeah, this is a great topic. The mentality piece that you talked about there, and I kind of want to stay on that there, where a player that does go over and make it, and now even your website and I noticed that when I was on it this morning, there's a little subtle but really obvious: every graduate has earned a college scholarship or signed a professional contract. Very clear about football goals and personal objectives. I guess how do you instill that there in a micro culture, micro environment where you're trying, again, it's a difficult thing to teach today, which is mentality, mindset. How do you go about it?
Yeah, it's one way for us. Obviously, we know that the boys coming into this environment, they're sacrificing a lot. You know, they're moving away from the family, away from their friends to come, you know, live in the middle of the desert. You know, and we know that with that, every single one of them, you know, we ask it, you know, who wants to be a pro soccer player? Every single one is, you know, hands up. Sometimes the coach is putting their hands up as well at the back when that question's asked. But you know, it's one where we know that realistically, you know, there's only going to be a small percentage that go professional. I think you know, we've been going 7 years now, and we've got, I think it's 29 of our alumni now that have signed professional contracts, which is a lot, but it's also not a lot, you know, in the grand scheme of things of the guys that come through. You know, majority still go the college pathway, and we'll always emphasize with those guys, you know, the college pathway is still a fantastic next stepping stone, and it isn't the end. You know, there's that can still be a pathway into the professional game, and I think, you know, the landscape is changing on that front as well, with you know, maybe more and more options for players to sign professional contracts than maybe there was 10, 15 years ago. But now the challenge is weighing up, well, you know, is that professional contract worth giving up the, you know, the it might be professional, but you know, what level of professional in it, and you know, would you be better off taking that full ride scholarship that you maybe have to Wake Forest University, you know, and that's a decision, you know, we always advise our families on, but ultimately it's the family and the player's decision. But you know, coming in with the mentality piece, I think to survive in our environment, you really have to love it. You know, if you don't love it, there's so much adversity that kicks in here naturally that if you don't love it, you know, you'll succumb to it. You know, you'll succumb to that adversity. But we think that adversity really helps shape and mold and develop the players, and the rewarding thing for us as staff is seeing the guys come in as young boys sometimes and have them go through the different stages and develop not only, you know, on the field but off it as well. I mean, we have a fantastic staff. I always, you know, put it out there, it's a team effort. When we first started the project 7 years ago, and Sean McCaffrey was the director, I think we started with 4 or 5 of us, and we were doing everything, you know, the laundry, you know, as we build this, I think now we have 36, 37 staff, from coaches, trainers, resident life staff, and, you know, equipment managers, all of those different things, and everybody plays their part in that culture and that mentality that we want to embed in the players. Is hopefully, you know, shown by example by our staff, because we're also sacrificing a lot to be here. You know, we're here because we love it, because if we weren't, we wouldn't last, you know, because again, it's a challenging environment, but it's such a fun environment to be in as well. So anyone that comes that's going to be successful here has to have that mentality, and often it's the boys holding each other accountable, you know, doing it in the right way. But you know, back at some of the players we've had, and I covered a session last night where it was on point on topic. I was covering our U16s and the mentality. Yeah, it's such a fun group. You know, they naturally have that intensity, and they're naturally, you know, holding each other accountable if they're not doing what they need to do, and understanding that what happens on the training field, what happens in the game is, it's not personal. You know, it's you know, it's everyone wanting to bring the best out of each other. And we've had a lot of players in the past that were, you know, like Diego Luna and you know, Julian Araujo, and those guys were a bit of an epitome of that. You know, they really showed that, you know, mentality that would then become a little bit infectious. You know, I think it's you know, they set the standard, they show the level, and everybody else sort of falls in line.
Yeah, it's another one of the tough balance where you know, you're playing for a big club, big brand. Obviously, in America, where the facilities are great, so I've never been out there, but I'm assuming that it's you know, top notch, and I've heard really good things. But then you've also got this element where I haven't seen Luna a lot, but what I've seen of it is like the guy plays with a little bit of an edge. There's a grit there, and you're saying there about that mentality piece. I think there's 2 ways in football how we look at this, and one of them is, well, we need to flood the space with psychological support. But then with that, you don't necessarily get the football context. So I guess, are you, with that mentality piece, are you tapping into kind of outside support as well, or is that all coming from the environment, or how do you? Can you give us an insight into how that's facilitated even?
Yeah, it's so we have a full support system here within the residency. So a little bit of an insight onto the program. Obviously, the boys majority live on campus at the facility. We have a high school that's at the complex as well. So they walk out of the dorm room and they're straight in the school. We have staff that live at the facility as well. So there's 24/7 care there. They have access to the school counselors. They've got the school has an independent staff that also is open to outside students, so they do still get that exposure there as well. The days for the boys are pretty jammed. They're at school 8 until 3, and then they finish at 3 o'clock. They come out and the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday they're with S&C after school, and then training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So we train 4 nights a week, strength and conditioning, 3 nights along with that. Then we also have the video sessions, video analysis. Thursdays is our staple day off. That's when we tend to do, allow the boys to be boys. So we do we'll sometimes take them to volunteer and opportunities, give back to the community. Like I say, our resident life staff do a tremendous job of, providing them with fun excursions as well, taking them to the mall, taking them to the cinema, just allowing them to be boys as well. But trying to create that support base for them without babying them. I think one of the benefits of our environment is that, it allows them to stand on their own 2 feet, and sometimes they aren't ready for it. So they maybe need to, that little bit of help and a little bit of support, but we try and give them everything they need to be successful. And if we fall short, we'll review and we'll look back at it. But on a staffing standpoint, it's everybody's there to to help. And one of the ones we also is our athletic training staff, who tend to have the finger on the pulse of what's going on in the academy. Because we sometimes will, we have so much open access to the guys, but there may be a kid that's struggling at training, and there may be an outside reason for it. Maybe he's having issues at home, that he's now away from his family home, but there's issues going on back there. And sometimes we can get an insight from some of our support staff that'll say, just keep an eye on, little Johnny, that this has happened back home. And we as the coaches would never have known that, but we have the insight and the communication from all of the departments. And we really try and work as a collective team to make it a success for the guys. And I think we've built a really, really strong staff that all buy into the culture, buy into the mentality, and buy into the support that's needed to run this program.
Yeah. We spoke just before we started recording about, they're going in at 13, 14, and you were saying, yeah, that's, I don't even know if I would have been ready for that. And I have no problem with saying I wasn't ready to go to North Carolina at 18 when I did it. So but 2 years later, it made me 100 times more stronger as a person, as a personality, and formed a lot of. So like even that transition of going away from home at that age, that would require an awful lot of support, right?
Yeah, it does, and we'll always, it's where we have to be a little careful as well, because we want to make sure if we're bringing a player in that he is ready. Because what we don't want to do is bring them in before they're ready, and then maybe they don't stick, and then we probably lose them for good. Maybe once they're in and then out, it's very difficult then to get them back in down the line. So we'll always say, we do have sometimes families of kids that really want to be part of the program if they are on the younger side. Sometimes with today's remote work, families will relocate to Arizona, to still have the kid initially be in the project. Probably a good example of a high level player with that would be Brooklyn Reigns. He actually joined us as a 12-year-old and randomly, came out to one of our winter camp programs, and he was in my group. And I'm going, who's this kid? Where's he coming from? And spoke to the mom, and she relocated from the Chicago area and moved into Maricopa, which is about 25 minutes away from us. And Brooklyn was with us from 12 to 16, but the first 18 months stayed with his mom, stayed in Maricopa. And then when she knew he was ready, he then came into the residency program, but still had his mom 25 minutes away, in the Valley of Phoenix for that extra support, But I look back, like you said there, Gary, I didn't leave home to come to the States till I was 22. And that was a big adjustment for me. So I look at the guys coming here and doing it at 14 and 15. And I always say to them, I have a ton of respect for you, because I'm not sure if I could have done it, but they are making that sacrifice, and we try and provide them with, the help and support. And we'll always, we had the orientation a couple of weeks ago, and one of our things to the boys is like, every single one of you here is going to go through some adversity. Push through that, don't shy away from it, because that's what will help shape you. You know, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because you know that will help mold you and that will help develop you. And I know when we speak to a lot of the college programs and the college coaches, they'll always say, you know, we love recruiting guys from Barca Academy, because we know we're maybe not going to face the challenges of the homesickness or that adjustment period of being away from home. They've already done that. You know, they've already learned how to do their own laundry. They've already, you know, learned how to stand on their own 2 feet a little bit. So they start college, some of them 3 or 4 years earlier than maybe they would have, or at least the college environment a little bit earlier. So it can be a really good springboard for the boys.
It's an extremely high bar, especially when you've got that badge, and even when I look at that badge, that kind of gets me to click back in to be like, oh no, this isn't the, you know. So whenever you're looking at evaluating those players and being honest about where they're at in the process, I mean, I guess with the element of transition of a 13, 14-year-old and deciding whether they're right or not, there's obviously going to be an embedding process. And how often are you evaluating, and what does that look like, and that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's one where we would say the boys are always being evaluated. We almost say to the guys, every time you step on the field, you're being evaluated, you're being observed. You know, that's not by just your coach, but we have, you know, our scouting department, we have our technical directors, the Barca technical directors that are here. They don't, you know, at the minute they don't take teams. This is my first year. Actually, I'm doing a slight adjustment. I'm not going to coach a team this year, just so that I can have a little bit of a, you know, overhaul of all of the teams. But, you know, on the formal evaluations, you know, we do, you know, I think inevitably feedback is important, you know, and sometimes that formal feedback is needed. So we do a mid-season review that normally takes place in December. But throughout the year, they're getting consistent feedback. You know, the beauty of the residency program, again, is that we have open access to the guys. So as soon as the guys finish school, and they only go to school 4 days a week. So they go to school Monday through Thursday. So Friday is an off day for them. So we can schedule meetings with the guys maybe a little bit more openly and readily than a regular program. And when I say regular program, I mean, you know, parents drop them off at training, take them home. You know, when do you find time for those, you know, meetings if it's not done virtually? So our office door is, we always say it's open door policy. We do a lot of film review, a lot of you know, whether that's individual video, you know, small group work, you know, maybe it's a unit, the back line or the midfield three, or maybe it's the whole team, you know, maybe it's just principles of play that we want to reinforce. But we also encourage the boys a little bit to, you know, take ownership. You know, if you have questions, or you have, you know, comments, or you need advice, or you want to bring out certain moments, you know, again, it comes back to that it depends question. You know, they'll ask us a question and we'll say, well, it depends. Can you, you know, show me the moment, you know, find the moment in the game, bring it to me, and we'll talk through that context, you know, to maybe could have done differently, or, you know, what was it, something that, you know, you could have done different? Was it a teammate? Was it a collective group? You know, how do we address that? How do we fix that? Or how do we at least paint the picture for the player that they have now a clear understanding of what we're looking for from them?
Another element alongside development is the coach development piece, and obviously, you know, you mentioned
Sean McCafferty and Ivan as well,
and you know, the element of coaches going there and having coming out of this is something a bit stronger. So I guess, what are the values there that now when you're overseeing and maybe you're taking a step back and you're going out and watching training sessions or even in a game day, what are some of the traits that a Barca Residency Academy coach has to have?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, one of sort of the core value acronym that we use here at the academy is HEART, and that's for the staff, the players, everybody. And it's essentially, the HEART is humility, effort, ambition, respect, and then teamwork, team play is what they say. You know, it used to be teamwork. They switched it to team play because they were like, we're playing here, we're not working, we're having fun. Yeah. You know, so we look for the coaches to try and follow a similar, you know, value structure, and I do think that this environment is a really good one for coaches to come in and see something a little bit different, learn and develop and implement maybe something that's unique. And we've had a lot of coaches that have come in and moved on to do really good things. You know, I know when I first came here 7 years ago, and again, I think in the first 3 months working alongside Dennis Silva, I think I learned more in those first 3 months than I had the previous 10 as a coach. You know, I was just, you know, my mind was blown, and Dennis actually left us after 3 months to go back to La Masia to coach the under-18 team there, and you know, still speak to Dennis now and again now. But you know, when it comes to the more of the domestic coaches, what we're looking for, it's, you know, are they going to come in and be open to new ideas. We certainly want to provide them with the support to grow and develop. So again, we have the office. I'm sat in my office here, but we have the office for the coaches to be here. So we squeeze everybody into the one office. At one point we were in two separate offices, and we wanted to condense it. We wanted to have that collaboration and an openness of new ideas and questions. And our Barca technical directors will do methodology meetings on a regular basis. So when it comes to the coaches we bring in, we know that we're probably not going to have someone who's going to come and be with us for 10, 15 years. It's going to be someone like Ivan Militar, who came in for a couple of years and 2 or 3 years and really embraced it, really, jumped in with 2 feet and grew, developed, and then moved on to, hopefully something better, something bigger and better. We've had a lot of guys that, Chris Harmon's another one that came in, fantastic coach. He followed Sean McCafferty to New York Red Bulls and is now the assistant coach at Austin City's second team. We've got a guy that's now with Orlando City, Eddie Wilding, another top coach that, was here with us for 3 years. And it's really rewarding for us when we see them come in and learn and develop. And we always want them to be leaving saying, I really enjoyed that. I really, it's almost a little bit bittersweet for them. They know they need to move on to take that next step in their career, but we want them to come in and really have embraced the opportunity that they have. Because for me, I'm maybe a little bit biased here, but I think any coach coming in, if they're willing to learn and willing to be open, this place can be, just an open book of knowledge that you can, grow, develop, and then take on throughout your career.
I find that so refreshing and kind of inspirational, because that's what coaching should be. That's what it should be, almost a think tank. And Sean's pathway fascinates me still, even a few years after chatting them, because I think to go from Barcelona to a Red Bull model, you need to be open-minded and you need to be flexible and adaptable to do that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's two probably polar opposite, maybe at least from the outside looking in philosophies. But I think what, and obviously, Sean was almost a mentor of mine, right? I worked with Sean previously in Philadelphia and, followed Sean here. And that was ultimately, came originally as a coach and was fortunate enough when Sean moved to Red Bulls to be elevated in. But one of Sean's strengths for me was how good he was on the field, and embracing it when he was here. And I think when he went to Red Bull, I was like, well, how are you going to manage that? And I think he's enjoyed that challenge, of how do I maybe find the blend of the two where, you can maybe still be, comfortable and good with the ball, but really have that intensity and press. And I know Sean used to talk about a lot, and we still do, the non-negotiables that come into it, the non-negotiables of your principles, that whether it's our style or a Red Bull style, it's, it's what are you going to stand by and what are you going to find value in? And I always say I love the methodology that we have, but I also know that there's more than one way to play the game, and this is how we want to play it here. But there's more than one way to play the game. I think that's the beauty of the game. If we all tried to do it exactly the same, it would be no fun to watch, And we'll even see sometimes with our style of play and our training, we sometimes struggle when we come up against a team that maybe are a little bit more direct, because in training I'm going, very rarely do I have my centre backs going winning headers, because everything is maybe, shorter and smaller spaces, and, we're focusing on that tight possession, positional play, and maybe we negate that longer ball that maybe not is how we're going to play, but we need to prepare our players for what they might see on a weekend against an opposition.
The deeper down you go to it, the more fascinating it becomes. Another question that I'm sure a coach is going to be driving listening to this, and something that I'm going to ask it because I bet you someone's going to think of this. I would love to work at the Barca Residency Academy because there's no parents. How do you manage parents?
It's a really good question. I think, we understand, and we'll always say when we have the ID camps and we have people come and visit, so whether it's a player we've scouted and recruited, whether it's a player that just by chance comes in, we're very transparent in saying, look, not only are we evaluating you as a potential player, we also understand you're evaluating us as, is this somewhere where I trust my son to be in an environment where he's developing not only on the field but off it as well, as the values line up with what I want my son to have. So it is a really good question, Gary, because we do sometimes forget that they have the parents because they're living on campus, So our communication a lot is direct to the player, and then 3 months in, we'll get an email saying, "Hey, just checking in. We haven't heard much. What's going on?" And so it's something we're always trying to increase our communication. But I do think we are spoiled sometimes in we have that open access to the player, so we can talk directly with the player. Now we do have to obviously include the parents as well. The parents are a big piece of the puzzle, because we'll always say, we're there, and this is one of I think I told you, my wife that works as the director of resident life here, so she'll always say, look, we're here as a supplement to the parents. We're not here to replace you. We're here to support you, and this needs to be a team effort, and we have to all be on the same page. And it's the same. I think we still face the same challenges every coach across the country faces, Gary. That everybody wants more playing time. Everybody wants to be the one that gets the opportunities to move up through the age groups, and so we're navigating to that. But I think for us, we're like we would say with every club, you have to be transparent, you have to be honest, you have to give them the feedback of where they're at, where you see them, and don't make false promises. Don't tell someone something that you don't believe. So if they're mid to lower bottom roster, you can be transparent with that, and you can tell them, say, this is what we want to do to work with them to improve them, and we see the potential. We wouldn't have brought him in otherwise, but this is where he's at right now. This is the plan we're going to have to get them there. So the communication is still crucial, but we don't see them on a day-to-day. Some of our coaches do love the fact that when they're having a training session, sometimes it's an empty field or it's an empty sideline. There's nobody there watching, and it's nice. So
last kind of leg of this interview is just to kind of go back to the tactical teaching of it and methodology of, all right, so the piece of taking a culture, which the Barca culture is, so rich and so powerful, but then it's also embedded in a Spanish culture. And this is something we had Bernat Mosquera recently, and he was saying about, I never thought of this before, about the sport and the way in America you try and score as quick as you can, and it's one action. So sometimes we like to think that we're creating our own culture, but we're really impacted by the global culture that we're in. And I've definitely felt that myself from looking at, even in the college space. It's like the games, you're hoping, you'd love to play a tactical game, but the subs and that horn's going every 10 seconds and there's no flow. I guess when you're then saying at the standard that you're trying to do this at, how challenging are some of the culture pieces in our landscape over here? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think the US is different to Spain, obviously, and different. I obviously grew up in the northeast of England, so it's I'll maybe preference my background growing up. I grew up on the streets of the northeast of England, where I was in a structured academy, but I did just as much with my local neighborhood kids. On the streets, that you'd start off with a 2v2 game, and before you knew it, it was 11v11 jumpers for goalposts, and I think that's something that naturally, just because America's so big, you maybe lose that a little bit. That's one of the things we think is an advantage here is we have to manage the boys' workload, but sometimes I got a call last week from our security guy, and he said, hey, just a heads up, 5 o'clock this morning there was a bunch of the guys out on the field before school doing a pickup game. Wow. And you're like, and I love that, because I'm going, that's great, but at the same time you're going, well, boys, we've got training tonight, so find the balance, so it's an interesting one with that. But I think going back to the cultural piece as well, I think when you chatted with Bernat, you talked a little bit about the the different sports, and the mentality is it's very much fast paced, high transitions, high intensity. I think the American culture is very much, they enjoy that intense environment, and maybe the Barcelona system of players is maybe a little bit more methodical and not going to say slow, but one of the things again, I coached our U16 group last night, and they're full of energy, and it's like when you let them on the field, it's just this, and it can sometimes become chaotic. And I think what I was saying to the guys last night is, and this is a message we use a lot, is you can still play at an intensity and a quick tempo with composure. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think you can have both, and I think that's the key. Recognizing the moments, when does it need to slow down, and then when does it need to speed up, and the decision making process of how you dictate that ultimately then dictates the tempo of the game. We want to dictate the tempo of the ball. We want to have the ball, and sometimes that's a question when we often get is, well, do you guys, a lot of teams when they win it, it's first pass is always forward, and we'll say, well, yeah, we don't necessarily want to not play the first pass forward. We want to make sure we secure the ball, but we want to make sure that if we do play forward first, that there's an advantage to playing forward first. What we don't want is for it to become, a ping pong game of the ball going back and forth, and it becomes a bit of a track meet. If it's not on to go forward, then we'll dictate the tempo. We'll maybe play a negative pass. We'll regain our shape, and we'll then hopefully control the tempo. And that's where it comes into, you talk about the college game, the constant subs. The beauty of the youth game right now is it is still a little bit rigid, because we'll say, especially living here in the middle of Arizona where it can sometimes be 110 degrees, it's no fun to not have the ball. If you're chasing and you're in our environment, as the game goes on, we often see that, sometimes a game might be a tight game, or a 1-0 game, or a 0-0 game. And as we go on and a team's been chasing the whole game, sometimes it then opens up in the last 20 minutes. I think that sometimes is something that's lost in maybe the college game, maybe the stereotypical college game of being fast paced. And I do think that the college game has evolved a lot. I don't want to knock the college game because there's a massive value in it. But I do think the substitution rules maybe make it more enabling to not wear a team down, and because you can just every 10-15 minutes be refreshing the energy, refreshing the legs. And I think on the youth side, we'll sometimes see that if we can dictate the tempo and manage it, we can wear teams down and exploit the spaces as they open up later in the game.
Yeah, I was actually at an interview yesterday with David Tinney at Austin MLS about tactical periodization and about the teachings through that, and how an element doesn't have to be fast moving to be intense, mm-hmm. and equally can be fast moving and not be intense. And sometimes when I look at, again, not to knock it, but sometimes I look at college and I think there's a lot going on, but the intensity isn't in terms of a tactical focus or even a technical focus of, it's kind of loose, but you can then have a slower, like the Barcelona game was on. Now, granted, it was played at a really high pace as well. Mm. But you look at some of the football that's been played today, and even it doesn't look on camera high paced, but the tension and the intensity is just at a scale that I've never seen football played before.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Gary. It's something we'll always say to our players is the difference between being a good player, a great player, or a world-class player is being able to play under composure at the different intensities. Because put me on the field as a 41-year-old guy with no pressure, and I can probably play a 10, 15, no intensity. I can play the pass. Can you make those decisions, under the pressure and under the intensity that really comes as you go up those different tiers and different levels? And I think that's the differentiator. There's a lot of good players that maybe don't make it because they kind of handle that, that intensity or that, difference between the levels.
Mm. Last couple for you, your own personal development as a leader in this space, and obviously with connected to Barca, but then there's a how many miles. How do you kind of stay in tune with what they do and kind of lean into that there for personal development as well?
Yeah, it's one way we're spoiled a little bit, Gary, because obviously we do have the two technical directors who are from Barcelona. They come and work with us, so they're here, based in Arizona, with us in the office every day. So we get open access to them. I've been fortunate enough, to be over to La Masia on a visit, 3 or 4 times now. Would have probably been more if COVID hadn't shut us down for a couple of years. But it's been really, really fun for me to go and be exposed to that. And it's actually what I found probably more rewarding is going there and seeing. You see from the under-9s to the under-19s, they're doing the same exercises, the same drills, and there's there's obviously managing that the different loads there with the different groups, but it's really fun to see that what they're doing there lines up with what we're doing here. We're constantly sharing game film and highlights of our top prospects. Our top prospects, the guys in Spain want to know who they are because they know that America has become a big talent pool. They've seen the likes of Diego Luna and Bryce Duke and Julian Araujo and Caden Clark, Matthew Hoppe. These guys that have all come through our environment that have ended up in pretty high levels of the professional game, and they see that there's talent here and they want to tap into it. And obviously sometimes it's giving them that exposure over there, and that can, whether it's be through the video or through the the trips that we have each year. But we want to try and get it to where all of our coaches get maybe the chance to go over there as well, you know, and having that little rotation without leaving us understaffed here in Arizona. You know, it's getting that exposure and getting involved and really embracing it as well, because we really do want to mirror what they're doing in Barcelona. We want to mirror it here, understanding that you're working with different cultures. You know, how can we make it as good as it can be here in the US to replicate what they're doing there in Spain?
How does that under-9 session look in terms of coach behavior? Are they, you know, is it methodical? Is it like a surgeon, or is it they're on top of it and they're...
I would say that the less at them. I think it's more, you know, the repetition of the exercises, the repetition of the drills, and then picking the moments of when to talk to them. And because ultimately we all know what it's like to coach 9-year-olds and almost to be a 9-year-old. You know, you just want to play. You want to get the ball at your feet, and you want to move the ball, and you want to be involved, and you want it to be competitive. So one of the things that, you know, we do here that we've seen them do there. Obviously, we'd only start at U15, but you know, when I went over and saw the under-9s there, you know, the competitive intensity that they have and that natural hunger is awesome to see. And you know, they just help facilitate that. You know, we always say the coaches are just facilitating the development of the player, but I would say it's less of the stop-start. It's more of the incision of picking the right moment of get in, get out, and then, you know, maybe it's pulling someone to the side to talk to them individually, but a little bit less of the, you know, 3-4 minute coaching points that you maybe sometimes see in some environments.
Last one again, very general one, but, you know, I think it's prominent over here where, again, the Barca methodology is a victim of its own success in a way, where everyone then wants to do it at certain levels. But let's just say there's a coach that's legitimately wanting to commit to do things better, not necessarily to copy and replicate, but like, no, I'm looking for a North Star and I want to follow that, and I want to commit to a more possession game and do things the right way. But I'm in the middle of nowhere in my own context, and I just need to know what not to chase and what to focus on. What would you say would be a good starting point in that?
Yeah, I think it always comes back to asking the question of the why are you doing something? You know, what's your why in how you manage something? So if it's, you know, this is what we think we're struggling with, start with the why and work backwards, you know, and that's always my advice to people and sort of what we tell the coaches here. Well, what are you trying to get out of it? And then, you know, take a step back. And ultimately, you know, we're fortunate here that we have a lot of high level players, but we understand sometimes that, you know, maybe you're not working, if you're working more at the grassroots level, you know, you could still, I think, run the same exercise with, you know, maybe you just adjust the constraints or you adjust the size, and, you know, you want them to have success. You want them to, you know, to feel like they're doing things well. So, you know, we'll sometimes even in our exercises, we'll maybe have it and it's a little bit too small. So we'll open it up. And because what we found is and sometimes it's, and I'll preface this with when we're doing a possession, you know, we'll do a simple rondo, a 4v2, you know, and we'll maybe make the space what it is. And we'll find that it's too easy for the possession team, and it's always that, you know, the recovery players, space is too big, and we've got to be careful sometimes not to fall in the trap. Go, okay, well, we'll make it smaller now, and yes, we've made it more difficult for the possession team, but we've now made it easier for the recovery team. So, you know, so sometimes we go, well, are you just being lazy now? You just don't want to run? You know, is it that the recovery was just not good enough? You know, and I think that's a balancing act as well. That comes back to what's the why. You know, if we want the team to have success and feel, you know, like we're maintaining possession and we're doing it, maybe we'll make the space a little bit bigger and we'll have the recovery players, you know, work with it. But if we want them to be, or vice versa, you know what I'm trying to say here, Gary, you know, be almost trying to find that scenario of what's the purpose of the exercise and how do we manipulate the exercise and put in constraints or size restrictions or whatever that might be to bring out that theme. And that would be my advice to any coach out there is, you know, what's your why? Work backwards and adjust from there, because the exercises are the exercises, you know, and anybody can do a 4v4 plus 3. Anybody can do a 7v7 plus 3. Anybody can do that exercise. But what are you trying to get out of it? What's the purpose of you doing that exercise? Is it just because this is what, you know, Barca methodology tells you to do? No, there needs to be a purpose of the process and the training that you would go through.
Outstanding. What a great way to finish. Ged, thank you so much. This has been amazing, and I can't thank you enough for being so open to share, you know, life inside and the methodology and the environment as well. It's been fantastic. I've loved it.
No, awesome, Gary. Great catching up, and thanks for having me on.